Planning Commission meeting to order, February 1st at 6 p.m. Everybody stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call. We'll start over here.
Carl Granzo, present.
Mark Crouch, present.
Randy Thomas, present.
David Smith, present.
And that is the full planning commission right now. We'll start off with public comments. Public comments are 3 minutes long, and you don't expect us to necessarily comment back on that, but we can if we want. Don't take offense if we don't. I think that's basically it. I think what we want to do is start off with Shirley because I know she's calling in remotely. So, all right, Shirley. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Prior to the meeting, I thought I heard you say that you're going to be taking comments during working on the code. Did I hear that correctly? It's hard when
Yes.
everyone's talking, but
Yeah, I'll go into that a little bit further, how we'll handle that. We'll do it in a couple sections, so.
oh, okay. Well, that was the majority of my comment I was going to try to get in, was just that the notes from the previous meeting and suggestions and that hadn't carried over into the draft in this meeting packet. But if we're allowed to, be able to have time to discuss it as we go through, then I don't have much else for a public comment until then, other than following up with my last meeting and making reports to council. I know that in the past, we were lucky to have staff make reports about the planning commission. But the thing with those reports is they got included in the consent agenda at council. And I feel like council never really gave them a good looking because they just voted on the entire consent agenda. And we had a counselor that just recently said that the building across the street was owned by M. Armstrong Construction and that he was building that building to store his construction equipment. And not only does he not own the building, but he's not even doing work on the building. So I'm really looking forward to you guys making sure that council's aware of the projects going on in town. I think that's going to be an awesome thing we have to look forward to. And I thank you all for your hard work on this code and for your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, most of those comments are about council, and I hope they're listening and take it up. Okay, the next person, let's do Patricia James. Yes, state your name and then that either you live in Lakeside or.
My name is Patrice James. I am with the LBO. I live in Lakeside. We think you should be cautious with being too restrictive. If Lakeside is to be successful, we need to encourage commerce, not make it harder. Same with home-based businesses, business signage, etc. We need to be business friendly to fill those commercial buildings. As a local business owner, I have a unique opportunity to speak to a variety of Lakeside citizens who truly enjoy coming to the special events in Lakeside. They prefer to spend their money in town versus at other events. These codes would make it nearly impossible to continue any of the events downtown, on Whoopee Beach, the Lakeside Junction, or even private house parties. The codes are too restrictive for our small community. We are not a ritzy community. We are a recreation area with multiple spaces for events, temporary businesses, and we hope you will consider this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is actually part of the planning commission that we take into account all this. I know that we started working on the code and we did have a fair amount of, input, but I'm very pleased to see all these people here tonight. So thank you. Then we have Sarah Coates.
Hi, I'm Sarah Coates. I live here in Lakeside. I have some notes I've been taking. So first thing I think is the permits. 6 months is a little excessive to pull in advance. Previously, it was 90 days. I know for trunk or treat, I usually pull them in August for October. I think that's a fairly decent timeline to pull permits. It just seems a little excessive to have 6 months in advance. Also, I have a whole bunch of notes. I think that the zones should include both commercial, marine, commercial, and open space. Wilkie Beach is currently rezoned for open space, and they are gravel. And it would not make sense to prohibit generator use in that area, even though that's a place where people like to have events. So I think the gravel or the open space should be permitted. Also, I was kind of confused why all temporary vendors or businesses need a $75 city permit, because I'm pretty sure the event permits cover temporary use for the events. I don't think any vendors, when they do like the Experience Lakeside or anything like that, get city permits for the one-day event. $75, that's a lot of money out of their pocket. Let's see here, there's lots of them. Also, it would affect trunk or treats. If I couldn't have trunk or treats, say at Osprey for some reason, because Osprey is grass, that would require generators. I'm not sure if the generator issue is restrictive only.
Sorry, sir, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you'll be able to speak on these items when we're actually working on the.
Well, I thought this was
Temporary
community
codes.
comments. These are my comments.
Okay, that's fine.
I just think that they're, like she says, they're pretty restrictive. And I hope it doesn't carry over to all the events in town, and it's for food trucks exclusively, I hope. I guess if I'm not allowed to talk, I'll sit down.
Well, you can talk. All right, so that is any other public comments out there in Cyberland?
Nope.
Okay, that concludes the public comments. Now, let's go over the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes? So
Yep, I won't see anything wrong with them.
I don't see anything wrong.
I'm okay with them.
I'm okay with them.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the minutes for January 4th, 2024. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Great. So now let's go over how we're going to take comments tonight. What we want to do is first, we're going to give you a recap of everything. There's a lot of information in here, and I know a lot of you guys picked up the booklet and everything, and it's kind of crazy all over the place. So what we'll do is we'll go through the whole thing, and so everybody gets a really good idea of what we're talking about as far as food trucks go and everything like that. Then at that point in time, when we finish with all that information, I'm opening it up to where everybody can ask questions and, maybe a few general comments. Then what we'll move, if we have time, we'll start going into the code. And during the code section, we'll have open comments at the beginning of the code section. And a commissioner might ask for somebody else to come up front. But first, before we start anything, do we have any food truck vendors here tonight? Oh, okay.
I have a point of interest real quick. Can we call them mobile food units and not food trucks?
We can
Because,
call them whatever you want, yes.
well, food trucks kind of make it more restrictive. And if we go by the health authority code, mobile food units, and by DMV code, we should always just take.
And we'll get into that when we get to the code section. Right now, most people are used to the word food truck, so I'm using that verbiage just to give a recap of everything, but yes, the correct terminology is mobile food unit. Things like, you know, peddlers and that type of thing kind of fit into a different category. All right,
We have a food truck, but we just use it on our property, you know?
private property, right. It's a different situation for that. We were thinking about some restrictions and we really kind of got to refresh on everything. But on private property, if you're in a parking spot, if you're doing it like, you know, county property and that type of thing. So, but, you know, we got to go through the whole thing again and make sure that when we were writing the code, that we weren't messing with private property per se. Good question. All right, so let's go ahead. You guys have anything else to say about it at this point in time?
The only thing I'm thinking of, and I was going to say to David there, is this your unit itself? You own that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's, I mean, it has access like all the requirements would be. Water, sewer, all the other things is regulated for, so.
Well, yeah, and we'll go through the whole thing at that point. Before I start getting into this huge packet, and trust me, I'm not gonna read every page of it, so feel safe on that. Let's talk a little bit about how a code change actually comes about. First off, somebody comes up with an idea for a code change. There's three ways to do that. First off, the council says, hey, planning commission, since the council is over the planning commission, they say, planning commission, we want you to work on this. So that's something that typically the planning commission will pick up right away. The second method is planning commissioners set of goals from what they've heard out in the community and that type of thing. Typically, we'll do 3 or 4 goals. And the last way to do it is by application by private citizens. So those are the 3 different ways. And to be honest with you, I think this one was a planning commission goal from last year.
Yes,
Am I right on that?
correct.
Yeah, so this was the planning commission goal from last year. I don't, oh, Rob, you,
That's not correct.
no, it wasn't.
It was not. The topic of food trucks or mobile food units and food truck courts, or if you like, mobile food unit courts, was brought to the planning commission by previous city manager, Melissa Bethel.
And it did go through the council.
It did not go through council, the
Wow.
best of my knowledge. Ms. Bethel thought it was an issue and requested that the commission look into it. The commission agreed to, even though it wasn't on their list of goals for 2023. And also considered, because the model code had mobile food units incorporated into a section called temporary uses, which also included special events. The planning commission decided to look at both temporary uses together because special events were on their list of goals for 2023.
Little bending of the process. Okay, and then after it's decided that it's going to be worked upon, then the planning commission does schedules it. You know, we put it on our agenda, we decide whether we want to take it up or not. And we've already did that process. Then comes the workshop. That's the section that we're in right now. We're just in here trying to figure out, hey, what's going to work for the citizens? What's not going to work, you know, and be able to mold the two together. And then after that is done, and we kind of rough out some form of a code for food trucks, then what we'll have is a formal public hearing on that, where people can testify for it, against it, and then once we get through that section, it turns around and it goes to the council, and they do exactly the same thing. I don't know if most of you probably would witness the things like, when we did accessory dwelling units and the whole big, code update and that type of thing. So that's kind of the process. Like I said, we're right in the middle, right in, just kind of setting what we want to have. And, I think that's all I got to say about the process. Does anybody have any questions? Good. All right. So now I'm going to go through a lot of information here about food trucks. And I'll start off with the minutes from March 16th. And this talks about, and I'm going to talk about the purpose and why we're actually doing food trucks. And I'm going to read exactly from the minutes. Commissioner Crouch began the discussion by asking commissioners to agree on the purpose of the code for food trucks. It was observed that there's an absence of specific code for this type of a business. Some aspects of public safety were not addressed, and the application of current codes for commercial development would be excessive for the business model. In other words, we realize that it's pretty onerous for somebody to have a food truck in Lakeside. The commission reached a consensus on the purpose being to impose reasonable controls and safeguards on public health and safety. So that's why we're doing it. We're not doing it to say yay or nay to food trucks or anything like that. We're just trying to make it so it works for everybody. And there was a really good article written by, I forgot what her name is. Should already source my people.
Are you talking about Beth Hunstone?
Yeah, what was her name, David?
Beth Hunstone?
Beth Hunstone. She's actually a planner. And I think this really kind of set the tone for what we were looking at. I'm going to read a few excerpts from this. I know everybody probably got the packet and read it, but let's cover this for everybody who didn't have the opportunity to go through 60 pages of paper. Across the country, entrepreneurial chefs are peddling their food on the road, moving into parking spaces, serving up customers with a broad range of culinary specialties at affordable prices. For many food truckers, this is a chance to try out their recipes, get a following, move up to bricks and mortar, which is obviously what we want in Lakeside, my comment, not hers. For others, it's a way to increase awareness of their anchor restaurants by spreading out into the community to broaden their base. So that's kind of a general of it. Now let's go into a few of the pros and cons. Many cities are embracing the rise of food trucks as a way to add jobs, bring vitality to the cities, and offer convenience and diverse eating choices to the customers. Yet others are resisting the trend when faced with angry pushback from established restaurateurs who say trucks are unfair competition and block views of their business. Opponents complain that mobile vendors aren't paying taxes, rent paying, ADA compliant, health inspected, zoning permitted businesses, while food truck vendors may not pay rent or property taxes. They do incur costs for food preparation, storage, fuel, permits, fees, truck maintenance. They also usually must meet a host of local regulations. So that's kind of the back and forth that we're trying to figure out what's a good mix for both of them. A couple things to consider when we're actually coming up with some type of food truck regulations are, we need to understand the definition, which David had actually pointed out earlier, that food trucks are distinct from things like push carts and trailers and other type of retail vendors. So we need to, really define what we're talking about when we're talking about a food truck, or the more correct term, mobile food unit. We also have to consider locations. what are good locations for food trucks? What are bad locations? For example, if you think about a mall has places where you can get quick, fast food. And they also have really fine dining restaurants. So, and they're in the same location, but how they're separated and the traffic patterns really make a difference. Then we're talking about on private property is something to consider, like Dave was mentioning earlier. You know, how do we handle that? We also talk about it being on public property, which is in the street type of thing. We also should consider the distance to the restaurants. You know, are we taking away competition from our local restaurants? You know, the ones that are brick and mortar, the ones that are here all year round. Also consider total mobility. And this is kind of not so much an issue anymore. It goes back to the days of the old ice cream trucks that the ice cream truck couldn't actually stop. They had to be flagged down. So we'll consider that also. Good locations. Food, and again, it's back to the food trucks, might not necessarily make sense everywhere in the city. And how many, we should consider the number of food trucks, because when we start really growing, we want to, you know, make sure that it doesn't, the whole place isn't filled up with food trucks and not enough, you know, regular restaurants. Size of the food trucks, I think that's pretty much set. Hours of operation, you know, what times do we want to have them going if they're gonna, you know, if they're gonna be next to a residential area, you don't want them to go until 1 o'clock at night or something like that. Other things to consider are things like table and chair setups, and that goes into the concept of food courts. Now, you'll notice in Coos Bay, they've actually got that really nice food court there right next to First Provisioners that seems to have generated a lot of interest in a lot of people when it first opened up. Now I'm not so sure that it's as popular, but then again, it's the winter, so. We also want to talk about depots, and depot is where they park the food truck at night. You know, how do we handle that situation? And of course, restrooms, that's important. And think about trash disposals and recycling. Signage. One of the things I found out about food trucks in Lakeside, their signage is pretty cool. I mean, I've seen things like, you know, big old pieces of slab tree, you know, with nice stitching and stuff like that. But, you know, I don't know about like one of those waving flagmen and that type of thing. So we should think about that. Bicycle racks is another thing which has very little meaning. So that kind of gives you what we're after and why we're delving into food trucks. And one of the things you have to realize is we want to, you know, have something that benefits the city of Lakeside, and food trucks are definitely something that needs to be looked at. Okay. So then we went to March 16th. And then what Mr. Rob Ward did is he gathered up a lot of different samples of the different codes out there. I believe he took 3 cities and he took the state law, and that's why your packet is so humongous, is because of all this. And then, but he nicely decided to give us a brief overview. So I'm going to go ahead and read the full overview of it so we can get our mindset around what we're kind of looking for. Okay, state law. Under state law, a food truck falls within the phase of mobile food unit. This term also applies to hot dogs, ice cream trucks, and other mobile platforms for the sale of food and beverages. The operation of food units must comply with OR 33.150.000 and is regulated by the Oregon Health Authority. which is your Coos County Health Authority. Well, the total is Oregon, but Coos County handles most of the safety enforcement of that. Okay, overview of state requirements. And these are required by the state. It must be licensed. In which the unit is operated prior to any operation and must also acquire any required local review, license, or permit. The units must have wheels, must be mobile, and designed and constructed to move as a single piece. Okay, all operations and equipment must be integral to the unit, and you're allowed one barbecue to be used outside of that. And these are state regulations, remember that. Must have an onboard freshwater and waste tanks. Unit may not be connected to public water and sewer, but can be connected to water unless connected to the sewer. So it can't be connected to water if you're not connected to the sewer. In other words, if it comes in, you got to have some way for it to go out. The state has a raft of other requirements for things like sinks, restrooms, seating, outdoor shelves, garbage, food storage, hygiene, food safety, etc. Mobile food units can operate temporarily during special events. And that's a critical thing that we want to think about. The use of food trucks for special events, we might want to consider that to be different. You know, because it's a special event. It's not going to be there for 10 weeks or whatever. All these things that are mentioned here will come up in the discussion of, mobile food units. Now I better switch over to mobile food units, or Dave will be watching me like a hawk. Okay, local code options. These are left out of the local code options because operators still are required to comply with local code, can therefore include these regulations by reference or ignore them entirely. So now what we're going to do is to get into the local ones. First off is the Oregon Small Cities Model Code. So for those of you not familiar with that, the state of Oregon came out with this template that people can use to model all their land use code off. They've had lawyers check it out, and they've had a lot of input to it. So it's something that if you're going to use it, it will actually not run afoul of the law per se, unless you change it around a little bit too much. But that's why that's a very popular document to use in developing code. The only problem with that, and especially with as old as our code is, sometimes it doesn't fit very cleanly. It's like putting a peg in a square hole. But we try to use the model code as much as possible, just so we know that we've gotten it right. We don't have a lot of lawyers up here. Well, I'm not a lawyer for sure, so that's why we use the model code. And this is the overview of the model code. The use is permitted in the zone. Property owner is given permission, and these are the type of things that are part of the model code. Lot standards are met, lot size, setbacks, etc. Ingress, egress is adequate, safe, and does not create problems in combination with traffic from other uses on site. Use does not violate visual clearance codes, which is always, we do have one intersection here that we have to pay particular attention to, and that's North Lake and Ave. The use does not violate, there is sufficient parking for both the temporary use and the other uses. Does not create an adverse off-site impacts. And those are things like traffic, noise, odor, vibrations, glares, and lights in a manner greater than others uses allowed in the outright zone. So in other words, we don't want to penalize, people who are just living in the area, just to have food trucks there. Okay, is adequately served by utilities as activable. So for example, there might be cases where you can actually hook up to the sewer and the water. And we want to make sure that it's used correctly. Optional are limits on length of use. Application has obtained all the required licenses and permits. Vehicular access and circulation, such things as driveways, shall accommodate all projected vehicular traffic on site without vehicles stacked or backed onto the street. Driveways shall be designed so that vehicle areas, including but not limited to drive up and drive through facilities and vehicle storage and service areas, do not obstruct the public right of way. Approaches to the driveways shall be located and designated to allow safe maneuvering in and out around loaded areas while avoiding conflicts with pedestrians, parking, and landscaping. So that's a very general, broad way of approaching the food truck issue, and it's very integral, very detailed. Coos Bay does not have a food truck code per se, instead lumps it into something called transient business and, mobile business. Mobile food trucks are explicitly included in this classification. Must have all local and state licenses. This includes all local business licenses and right of way. No sidewalk obstruction. Must be self-contained, no waste discharge, no ropes, no wires, and other trip hazards for pedestrians. If the city issues a special event permit for an area that is approved location of a transient business, the transient business has to move from the duration of the event unless the event organizers lets them say. No transient business in the residential areas as long as the stay in location is no more than 15 minutes. No transient business within 10 feet of an entrance of a business, nor within 50 feet of any competing business. The area must be litter-free, and the transient business, in this case, we're talking about food trucks, removed when the goods are not being sold. No sale of or consumption of alcohol, signage restrictions, proof of insurance, limited to operating on the city-owned property and City Row. And I believe City Row is, yeah, okay, good. They always have the definitions, and it's prohibited on Highway 101 for obvious reasons. It's a pretty busy street as it is. All right, so Eugene's kind of a bigger city. Eugene has a food cart program, which includes food trucks. These enterprises are allowed to operate under contract with the city in specific downtown areas. So in other words, they're kind of a franchise of the city. And I guess that's probably not the best way to explain it. Food units operating in the city property, and the city collects an application fee plus the greater of the monthly site rent or 6% of the gross. Hold harmless is required, proof of insurance is required. The city has the right to accept or reject any food cart. Agreements are between the city and the operator. There is a stated exception on hours per day and days per week of service seasonally adjusted, and a minimal number of 20 days per week. Per month, thank you, Carl. Proposals have to include a completed list of products to be sold. City discourages duplication of vendors and may not sell items not in proposed unless they get prior approval from the city. Operators must comply with the state, county, and city health regulations and requirements and inspections. Heaters and lights must be installed in compliance with the building codes. Electrical appliances and equipment must be rated for outdoor use, no sound amplification. Vendor must provide their own trash containers, arrange for disposal of such trash and keep their area free of litter. Use of the city trash receptacles for vendor trash is prohibited. City may request the vendors move for special events and cleaning. Such movement can be required 4 times per year and requires at least 2 weeks' notice. Operators must maintain complete, detailed, and accurate records of all business transactions. For vendors operating on privately owned property, owner-approved required units cannot take up parking spaces required by other businesses at that location. Units are not allowed to block the motor vehicle access or pedestrian ways. Pedestrian walk-up and traffic only is allowed. Units shall not be parked in required landscape areas. Still got a couple more to go, but we're getting there. It's good to be thorough. That's the way I look at it. Might be as boring as heck, but we need to, put it out there so everybody knows what's going on. Like Coos Bay, North Bend does not have a food truck code per se, but instead lumps this into something called transient business. Mobile food units are explicitly included in this classification. Requires business license writer for transient business, and all required health permits. Operation as part of a special event is allowed and requires the same licensure, but the fees are prorated based on the number of days the business will be conducted. Locations restricted to commercial and industrial areas or residential areas where there's a public park, institutional use, or commercial use occupied by the parcel. May only operate adjacent to state highways with the permission of ODOT. For locations outside of the public right-of-way, written consent from the owner, room to pull the vehicles off the roadway, and adequate parking. No encroachment of parking, landscape, or setbacks of any of the established businesses. Clear sight triangles, which is the same thing as vision clearance. Minimum space 3 feet from the sidewalk or the curb, whichever provides of a greater distance from the right of way. Minimum of 5 feet from the service windows or other customers' access points, active drive aisle. All items visible from the street in good repair and safe and clean condition. No licenses issued without evidence of passing a fire inspection. So that's a little bit different. Boards, cables, pipes, and similar items shall not create a tripping hazard in pedestrian and vehicle areas. Signage limitations: no mobile food unit shall stop in the public right of way in residential zone for more than 15 minutes. Use of public property other than the right of way during special events only. Drive-through service in general commercial zone and must have at least 80 feet of queuing distance from the service window. Don't see a lot of those out there, but it's always a possibility. Well, I take that back. A coffee food truck would probably fall into that area. Mobile food units in the right of way may not be within 20 feet of the intersection and in the crosswalk. In an area where stopping or parking vehicles is not allowed, less than 10 feet from other mobile food units. Food safety inspections, sanitation is required by the county. Mobile food units shall not be conducted or connected to water, sewer, unless permanent. And just so you know, there's this whole thing about permanency of connections of water and sewer. Once you're connected with the water and sewer, and that's part of the qualifications for becoming a permanent location. So that's why that keeps on coming up. Permanent occupancy, permanently connected to sewer, water, and power. Eliminated with downcast and shielding lights when operating during hours of darkness. Requirements for both visual screening and areas of view for crime protection. Considered as a new commercial development and subject to all the requirements of new commercial development. And these 4 items were about permanent occupancy. And now we're going to do the very last one. This is kind of a nice one. This is very short and concise code for mobile food units. This is the city of Stanton. They require a business license, a county health license, and a sanitation licenses. Unless it's a special event, if in place more than 72 hours without moving, it requires review as a land use development. In other words, permanent type of business. Allowed locations, zoning, eating zones where eating and drinking establishments are permitted. Parking lots of manufacturing businesses for purposes of serving employees of that business. City-owned property with permission in areas that of a designated special event or street closure during those events. Must be an approved parking lot or other hard surface area. Customer line must not block sidewalk or pedestrian pathway. Driveways or drive aisles of any off-street parking. Visual triangles. Must not create traffic. Must not create any traffic or safety hazards. If parked for 24 hours or more, screening of all conduit, tanks, storage from all public areas and streets. You have to have that screening, temporary landscape and skirting around the permitted food unit. And finally, may not be a permanent structure. It must be remain capable of moving with the wheels attached. As you can see, that one's a very simple short code that explains that. At this point, let's I'll let everybody ask any questions they might have. I'm kind of getting tired of reading. So does anybody have any questions? Renee?
Population of Statton?
Stated.
No, Statton?
I'm not sure. I don't, yeah. I don't think it's a very big city. You can look it up on your phone and tell us all.
I think at the time, they said it was pretty close to our size.
Yeah.
That's what it included.
37,000.
Yeah, 37.
That's community wide, 30.
So that's more in
A
line.
little bigger than Lakeside.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, I'm. With serious. 8,000.
8,000? Thank you.
And you kind of notice,
Still bigger.
and one of the things I noticed about all these different cities is the bigger they get, the more restrictive they get. I mean, I don't think I've ever really seen where somebody wants to be like a franchisor of the food truck business, but yeah, that's easy. But that was pretty interesting. Does that jog everybody's memory about what we were talking about? It's in the earlier time. It was a lot of stuff. And, you know, I apologize, but I really think we needed to be very thorough about it. So when everybody kind of gets an understanding of what's out there and what's going on, we can all make really good decisions. So no other questions. Now let's go on to meetings. We had a very good discussion on May 4th in regards to food trucks. This was our first meeting that we had. Well, I think it was our second meeting, but this was the first one where we really got a lot of participation. We actually had a very experienced food truck operator in here and could tell us some things and, you know, mention stuff that we might not have thought of. And hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. They had the one over there on the over there on 101. And nice people. So now that we went over all that information, this is the point where we started kind of looking at the code. And we were making a decision as to which code we wanted, right, guys? We were talking about whether we wanted to go with the full-on model code or at the very first meeting, we were talking about the model code and we were talking about the Stanton code. And we decided on the model code for that meeting. And then further on, we decided to use the model code and incorporate special events to it also. There's no requirement. And, you know, now that we've had 6 months to think about it, I'm not holding that, I'm not saying that we go any route or continue with what we're doing. You know, one of the things you always want to do is kind of admit that maybe it was too much to chew off and, you know, we might go a different route. But I'm just mentioning kind of a flow of things. So I highlighted a couple things in the minutes there because, like I said, we did have a lot of good discussion on that. And I wanted to kind of recognize the people who were doing it and everything like that. So let's go to, and you don't have to look it up on your books, but I'll just start May 4th. And it's kind of halfway down where we really started talking about the food trucks. Food truck draft for temporary uses contained a requirement, and these are discussions from the regular citizens on this because we were talking about this. The draft code of the temporary uses contain a requirement that such uses be on a hard surface. Gravel, asphalt, dirt, or not on dirt and not on gravel. Mr. Hand indicated that he reviewed this as overly restrictive and that sitting on gravel should be allowed.
And I did too.
And Carl did too. I don't know where Randy stood on that.
I was thinking, however, it's gonna be put one in, it's gonna make it for the city. I was a little liberal with that one.
Yeah. I was a little strict on that because of the fact that, you know, stuff sinks into the gravel and you're also going to start creating ruts.
I was
So-
just thinking, of course, of the temporary use of that,
Yeah,
you know, it wasn't gonna be a long term where we'd have 4 seasons come in. That's my understanding. We had to make it work, yeah.
and I think that's kind of where one of the things when we're considering revamping this whole thing is we want to consider, well, how long is that food truck going to actually be there and what type of damage is going to be created?
So I do have a question.
Sure. Well, you guys go.
In the idea, and I'm kind of getting the feeling of the people, is they're thinking of these various fundraisers, various festivals that they're having, that a lot of these food trucks are brought in as enhancement of it for a temporary thing. Basically, they're in for the event and they're gone. So, I mean, wherever they are, like, I know a lot of the fairgrounds, a lot of grasses, lots of food trucks get into like those old the old wagon train.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well-
they get all in, and once they're done, they're gone. And it's,
And we shouldn't necessarily lump food trucks that are out there day in and day out with special events.
yeah,
You know, and I think we decided that, which is why we decided to also cover the temporary uses.
Yeah.
From what I remember. Okay, kind of your understanding of it, Carl? Yeah.
So we're
Okay.
gonna scratch the no dirt or gravel.
Not at this point.
Not
We're
at
not,
this point, just-
we're not discussing the code at this point. We're just trying to bring up everything that we brought before, and then we'll start talking about the code. I mean, everybody needs to understand, and I don't want to lose the thoughts that we had before, because I don't really feel like recreating the wheel, and some of the people that had expressed opinions earlier aren't here. So let's cover this part first and get totally knowledgeable, and then we'll start working on code. So that's my thoughts. Are you guys okay with that?
Like get a foundation on it.
Yeah. So that was the gravel. The draft code for temporary uses contained a prohibition against placing transient businesses within 10 feet of the entrance of a permanent business unless the temporary structure was being placed by the owner of the permanent business. Mr. Hans suggested that this be amended such as the placement within the area be allowed by the permission of the owner of the permanent business. Mr. Hans stated that the draft code prohibition. So that's the topic on that, and I know that I have expressed an opinion where
I
we
think
want to
that,
protect
I
our
think
small
that was
businesses.
changed in our draft.
Allow the Oh, do you think we changed that?
I think we changed that.
I thought it was always there about the permission of the owner, but we could change it in the draft. So, I mean,
That would be
that,
the owner of the area in which they're designated to be in.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not talking about some block out the roadway.
I mean, obviously, if some business says, oh, okay, you can put a food truck right next to my business. You know, you made the decision.
So we're talking about businesses allowing other business to be in.
On their property or,
Within 10 feet.
Okay, so not a residential guy saying, come over and put a
Yeah, no. Okay, Mr. Hand stated the draft code prohibition for the use of internal combustion electrical generators by a transient business was something that was needed to be looked at. He raised the example of use of a gas generator to power Christmas lights at the holiday event. He also stated that many food trucks use gas generators for whatever reason, and this should be allowed if not violating some sort of noise code, and question why anybody would want to limit the options of food trucks. The options that a food truck has for acquiring electricity. And then we went into a really big discussion over gas generators. We talked about noise levels, pollution, safety hazards, that type of thing. And I don't know that we ever draw a conclusion, but hey, a lot of people are here tonight, so who knows, maybe we'll figure an end to that.
how about if we were to draft something maybe to, if they are connected to power, they have no use for a generator, but if they're not connected to power and their generator doesn't make a noise ordinance and it's not overly noisy, then I think a food truck should be able to have a generator.
And we'll discuss that when we're going over the code. That one went around for quite a long time. So we'll get to that when we start looking at what we want to do with the code. Still in recap, almost done with recap, so. Okay, the Bertrams contended that it is not possible to hard connect a food truck to a sewer system. And that this should not be a requirement for a business that generates black water waste, and the health authorities allow them to move food truck with gray water waste on board. Mr. Hand commented that the health authority permits were the important point, and that Lakeside should not be considering requiring anything for a use that had been regulated and approved by the Health Department. Staff suggested that the conversation might be aided by considering the intent of the code draft with required to convert temporary uses to permanent uses. So we were talking about considering whether it's going to be a temporary or a permanent use as to whether to hook it up to the water and sewer system in that discussion. The intent was not to cause the mobile food units to convert to a permanent site of business, but to prevent someone from placing a substandard development as a temporary use and then using that permanently. Oh, Dave, if I can ask you a question, since you have a food truck, can you hook it up to the sewer? Okay, so it's not a common thing to
You
be.
can, you have a gray water tank.
Yeah,
Gray water tank.
yeah, that's what I thought mostly it's used for
It's
that,
just like an RV.
Yeah. but I've seen units where they hook them up to the water and sewer. Like probably some quick hand job, yeah. So,
Yes, they have to be done.
okay, good. Then Mr. Hand commented that while he understood that it was not desirable for food units to come in and displace the permanent businesses, we should make exceptions or room for what is becoming more popular, such as food, mobile food unit and food truck courts, which is something we definitely need to discuss. I mean, I kind of personal opinion, I kind of like the concept that they're doing out on the 101 where there's a couple trucks and there's tables and all that type of thing, but that's my personal opinion. We should make exceptions, okay. Commissioner Crouch agreed with the food, oh, well, here we go. Commissioner Crouch agreed with the food truck court, could be a positive development and with the idea that a balance is found between that permitted, prevented detriment to permanent businesses while still allowing food trucks to provide service to the area. Mr. Hannon stated that through the Business Owners Association, they had spoken with every food service business in town, and none of them had expressed any fear that food trucks are taking any business away from them. My final highlight here was consequently, there was no discussion or consideration of the code for, oh, okay. So then we turned around.
For the mobile food unit only.
Right. So then we turned around and said, okay, we've got all this information. We know what's going on, kind of got a good idea of what's going on. And we started working on the original code, which was just going to be for food trucks. But Rob had presented 3 different types of scenarios. One was for, maybe it was just 2. How many was it, Rob? I think it was just 2.
Just 2.
Yeah, just 2. So one was with food trucks only. And then the other one, we decided to do with food trucks and include temporary uses, because you can see where it can kind of get things messed up when we're talking about food trucks. And you're saying, well, if they're only here for a little bit, why are they being penalized with all the restrictions that you normally find with the other food truck? So we decided to include temporary uses. I think. Oh, no, not it. Okay, so Mr. Bertram indicated that it was not uncommon for food trucks to leave its food base, go to businesses to serve its employees or customers for several hours, then actually return back to the food base. And this was in discussion about, length of time that they were operating in a specific location. Mr. Hand said that it would be, and remember, this is kind of choppy as to, each of the different things, because we discussed other stuff in the meantime. Mr. Hand said that it would be great if this item were amended to remove, okay, the code draft containing a prohibition against use of amplified sound other than a music player. Mr. Hand said that it would be great if the item were amended to remove any mention of sound amplification. A simple state that a music player and simply state that a music player is allowed. Staff replied that the intent was to prevent the use of bullhorns and similar devices. Mr. Hand replied that such use should be allowed unless violating noise ordinances. Commissioner Crouch felt that the sentence disallowing sound amplification was important to set the tone and not disturb surrounding areas. The code draft included a requirement that temporary uses comply with building codes. Mr. Hand wondered what the building code requirements would be for a canopied tent in an event. So a little bit about sound amplification. Lakeside does have a sound amplification nuisance code, but it's pretty much impossible to use because they specify a specific model to measure the sound amplification, and you have to be certified. Well, that model doesn't even exist anymore. So right now it's pretty hard to control noise nuisances. The code draft. Now we're on. The code draft included a requirement that the temporary uses maintain required licenses, including a Lakeside business license. Mr. Hand asked if this meant that a business license that comes to town for one day is required to have a Lakeside business license. Staff replied that this is consistent with the meeting of the code draft. Mr. Bertram observed that when food trucks move from county to county, they similarly have to undergo a separate health inspection and permitting in each county. Mr. Hand suggested that it would be problematic for a business operator who decides to come do business in Lakeside for a weekend when City Hall wasn't open. Commissioner Couch responded that it would be a poor planning on the business operator to come to a location for business without finding out what is required first. Mr. Hand responded that the community may not wish to penalize the business operator for having poor planning. The code draft included criterion for temporary use becoming permanent if continued for specifically the time. Among the requirements for conversion to a permanent use was connecting sewer, water, and power as applicable. Mr. Hand stated that there were permanent businesses that do not require connections to the sewer system and interpreted the code draft as meaning that all businesses would be required to have a sewer connection. Ms. Bennell stated that the Mancheria has been on the current site for long enough to be considered permanent, and that it would therefore be in violation of not having a permanent sewer connection. She asked how this would apply if they did not need sewer or water. Mr. Hand indicated that the food truck had been in the location for long enough to be considered permanent, but it had an onboard water system and was approved by the health department that a water connection would not be possible. I read the minutes of this, so everybody got the accurate story of what had happened before. I think it's important that the discussions were as is. Having said that, that's a lot of information. Do either Randy or Carl, do you have anything else that you can think of that we had discussed?
On the, during that time. During that.
Yeah, during that time period. And you can even.
I was just thinking, I'm just gonna just kind of summarize that thought, is that when we got this particular issue coming in, how we all got together and discussed various things, not definitely with a solid, answer, but to kind of use it as a tweaking thing and to put this on an agenda if you could in the future to come on food trucks.
Right.
And so that's basically what I kind of got out of it. Yeah. I mean, there was feelings of the citizens discussing what could be and what can't, and I thought they were very, very good. I mean, they helped stimulate the.
I think we had great
Yeah, really,
conversation. Yeah. Now, does anybody have any questions about what I talked about? It was kind of a thorough, dry explanation of everything, but now that do you have any general questions? Oh, go ahead.
So, as a general consensus, we're trying to make it less restrictive, correct? Not more restrictive? or-
We're not trying to make it more or less restrictive. I personally don't like to use the word restrictive or less restrictive. We want it to fit in to what works for Lakeside. So obviously, anytime you do any code, it tends to restrict, right? Because otherwise you have nothing at all. But we don't want to hurt an opportunity of food trucks. But we also don't want to hurt the businesses that are trying to survive right now. And one of the things about the planning commission is you got to think about the future and how we're going to build our city and how it's going to look. And so if you go totally unrestricted, then, you might not get the results you want. If you go too restrictive, then you lose business and you don't grow the city. So it's a balancing act. I hope that answers it a
So
little bit.
when would the next draft be available to?
Well, let's see, what time is it now?
7:04.
7:04. I was thinking about stopping at 7:30 tonight. I think we can probably at least tonight decide on the draft that we're going to be working on. We won't have, these are my guesstimates, is we probably won't have a full draft where we move into the stage of a hearing for probably a couple months. But one of the things I do want to get ironed out is what we want within this month or next month. And then we'll have a finalized draft that we can present and have a hearing on it.
So we already have a draft in place. that we were working on.
We were working on it, but only got so far.
Yeah, well, why don't we take that draft and start at the beginning and go one step at a time?
And that's exactly what we're gonna do. That is exactly what we're gonna do. We have the draft in our.
Yeah, because there's no sense in rewriting a whole draft, or we can take the draft that we've got and.
Oh,
mark it
yeah.
up.
Yeah, there's no reason to recreate the wheel.
Yeah,
Unless everybody is saying that what we were doing before is unworkable. And then we have that. Good question. Any other questions at this point? Any general comments about food trucks? I know we had some of them in the general comments, but. No? Oh, Rob?
I have a general comment about the code structure as you go through it.
And just so you know, Rob is the one who modified the code structure for it, so.
I would suggest as you go through the various code sections that lay out a requirement for a mobile food unit, that you consider whether that should apply to all mobile food units in the city, whether it should apply only to consider whether it should be private versus public property. For example, should a restriction only be in place for a food truck that's located on city-owned property, like the right-of-way? And whether specific restrictions should or shouldn't apply to mobile food units that are part of an event. So if you decide collectively that some particular section shouldn't apply on private property or a special event, then you can structure the code so that food units are exempted from that portion when they're on private property or part of an event.
Good point. So let's just keep in the back of our mind, always consider, is this for permanent or event? You know, so we can distinguish what we're gonna, you know, what it would apply to. Yeah. All right, great. So, are we in consensus about, working on the. So do you guys all have this one? So it's called Draft Code Proposed Standards for Temporary Use, included in mobile food units. And you kind of had to pull it out of one of your packets. It was like halfway through it. Was this the June one or was it May? Yeah, who knows? It might be
If we
easier.
worked off our old
Yeah,
one,
Dave,
if we
it looks
worked
like
off
you-
our old one, I
Yeah,
have,
Dave,
I have
Dave.
one.
is this it?
Yeah,
Good.
I have one.
So Dave's
I
got
have-
it.
I have-
This one here?
That's yours. You can have that one. I got another one. I there's- I believe.
That's what I was looking for earlier and I didn't see it.
I do. Off of our draft code.
Here it is. Right there.
You found it? Okay.
It's right at the end of the last thing.
So Randy's missing one.
Well,
No,
it's the last thing.
Got it. I was told I have it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Randy's got it too.
Yeah, there it goes.
Okay, good.
This is our draft code that we've been working.
Does anybody out there want a copy of this too?
Rick's making copies right now.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. So we'll hold off a little bit and take a little breather. Sorry, it was a very long discussion, but. I tell you, one of the things I hate is when we get stuck, when we start working on something and then have to start it up 6 months later. While we're waiting, does anybody have any general questions about the planning commission?
All the members have a copy.
Yeah.
2 pages.
We're making more. Four pages?
About four.
4 pages, I think. 4 pages.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages.
Oh. Yeah, right. There's one there, I draft both for mobile food units only.
This the one starts with this.
Right.
Okay, this whole thing, and then this. That's that too.
Yeah, but we're not concerned about that.
That's 3 pages.
At the back end, there's 2 different ones. There's the draft code for mobile food units. And then the other one for temporary land use including mobile.
Yeah. Just a lot of packets and stuff.
I think they could fix ours real easily.
I like your optimism.
Well, if you use the health authorities code, since they're mandated, mobile food units are mandated by them, you're pretty much limited to public right of way, which Lakeside's really small, so no public right of way except for special events, which would include Wolfie Beach, Park, City. So that takes care of that private property. Let's put it in open and commercial properties, open spaces and commercial properties.
Well, we'll go through the whole thing here. I understand.
And, okay,
All right, so, what this is, and I believe we had actually already started, marking up on this. But this is the proposed, original, rough draft of the, mobile food units. And I know your copies, you can't see where it says yellow and blue, but that's okay, we'll get through it. So we added definitions to start off with. We wanted to, the approach is the interface between public road and privately owned road or driveway. So we define mobile food units as any device propelled, powered by any means that is self-propelled or can be pulled or pushed down the sidewalk, street, highway, waterway on which food is prepared, processed, or converted, or which is used in selling or dispensing food to the ultimate customer. So are we okay with that definition?
I like it.
It matches the health authority.
Yeah, pretty clear. And just to clarify, the health authority is more interested in the health than all the real pieces of that city to me. But
Well, they override it. They're the ones who give the mobile food unit their yes or no for a mobile food unit.
right,
So
But then-
That's what, but then we, they can say yes to the unit, but then we need to do the code where it needs to be placed.
yeah,
right,
So
right. So
that's how they not, don't.
so the health authorities, what they say has to happen. So we don't even worry about what they're doing. Because we're saying, no matter what, this has got to happen. And there you'll see the overlap in the actual code, but we have to make sure we follow that one. All right,
I do have a question.
Sure.
And I'm, of course, maybe this is just going beyond that. I, first of all, given the greatest assumption that people who spent money and have a food truck would have done all of their due diligence in order for them to put all that product on their unit to sell, that they would know the regulations as far as the health department and all that. So I would like to give them, let's give them that they know, basically by being in business, what that is. But for us, in the city, it's the Lakeside side where they can put their knowledge of equipment and everything too.
oh, it's more than benefit of the doubt, they have to have license.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, they
Yeah.
know that, that's
well, they even asked if where are you dumping your gray water?
right.
And the state law says if you hook up to water, you have to be hooked up to sewer. Period.
so in regards to that, the county regulates that.
The state regulation also says water,
Right.
you have,
But
if you're hooked
But
to
the
water.
county
you're
is
hooked
the
to
one
water,
where you
sewer.
get your permits and for that type of thing. Okay, good. So we're all okay with mobile food units. Transient business is a business that operates in the city and has no fixed permanent location from which the business is conducted. Occupation of location for, we'll leave this open at this point, consecutive days constitutes a permanent location. Transient business does not include service work where an operator drives into a particular premise in order to perform a specific service. Example, but are not limited to, is like landscapers, maintenance workers, plumbers, etc. So we were having a sticking point on the amount of time in a particular location. So the model code, I believe, had 30 or more consecutive days. What are people's thoughts on that?
It says that right here too, 30 to 60 consecutive days.
Well, we can choose however long we want to allow them to permanently be there. Is it something to where we leave them there for the season or, 30 days and move on?
Well, is this for private property or public? Right away, because if the city, let's say you park food trucks down 8th Street. They're gonna create a congestion on the public right of way. And private property, whether it's commercial, private property, they are out of the right of way. So we can make our code really simple for food trucks to come in here on private property. Where are you gonna put a mobile food truck on public property, on the public right of way.
Yeah, but we're discussing what we consider a transient business. You know, as far as,
You've got a request for comment when you have an opportunity.
okay. We're discussing the transient business itself as far as, I lost my train of thought.
For 45, 30 days.
Or something like that, right, instead of, you know, what's actually considered a permanent business. Instead of, you know, a food truck just coming in and out. Type thing. But we'll see a little bit more, so let's hold off on that until we see the definitions down here of how we're actually applying transient business. Okay, comment?
Hi, Shirley Benell again, and I have my notes from the previous meetings, and I also recently rewatched the meeting videos. And we discussed that it should be longer than 30 days and that 45 days would be more appropriate to cover businesses, vendors that possibly come for longer events such as farmers markets, etc., where it's a series of them. We wanted to be sure something like that would be covered, and it sounded like at the time that we all thought everyone was thinking 45 days might be a more reasonable description. Thank you.
Do you Shirley, do you remember our reasoning behind that?
What the reasoning that
Festivals and was that it or?
right, the example was given of a farmer's market or like the Friday vendors that Reedsport does now. Like the first Friday of the month for like 6 months, good weather months, they have vendors set up in their downtown area to attract folks in. And if it's a 2-day like that, 2-day farmers market multiple times, being more lenient with the 45-day instead of a 30-day it's a minute detail, but it could be one. We don't want to make codes that we think might actually get broken right away. Yeah. These are events that people are doing around us and are a good possibility of happening in Lakeside.
I do remember the discussion now. Thank you. Yeah, okay.
We split it for then like a special events. I mean, if you have a farmer's market go 1 day a week for 3 months, that's 3 months. And we've already said the duration of a placement of a temporary structure can be 3 months consecutive.
I'm not opposed to increasing it or anything like that, but I think we need to look at all the code and see how it actually fits in. And I don't want to be like changing the time when we look down further in the code and go, oh, well, we really need to keep it shorter than, 45 days or 30 days. So if you guys are okay on holding off on that question for right now.
Sure, let's continue. We can knock this out before 7:30.
Dave, you don't know me very well.
David.
Nothing gets
No,
done in 30 minutes.
David.
I'm old. All right, so why don't we see how this location issue fits into the rest of the code to make sure that we don't get the time frame right. And I do remember the discussions on where we were talking about it. I just want to really get it solidified in my mind. All right. So now we're moving on to temporary uses. Temporary uses are characterized by the short-term nature and by the fact that permanent improvements are not made on the site. So that means, like a festival or something like that. Temporary uses occur no longer than, we're gonna have to figure out the days on this. And I know there was a lot of discussion on this one.
I have 45 from my notes.
Oh,
Again,
maybe there wasn't. So temporary uses Our uses include, but not are limited to, construction trailers, leasing offices, temporary carnivals, fairs, mobile food units, parking lot sales, retail warehouse sales, seasonal sales such as Christmas tree sales, vegetable sounds like food markets, and similar uses. And just to clarify for everybody, construction trailers and leasing offices happen to fall underneath temporary uses, but really have nothing to do with retail type of operations. The code contains permit procedures for 3 types of temporary uses: special events, temporary sales offices and temporary buildings, which we kind of mentioned, trailers, kiosks, and other structures as follows. So does everybody kind of understand what we're getting at with temporary uses? Right?
This sounds like what Shirley was talking about, because it has the vegetable stands. I think this is what she meant, the 45 days. Because it was cumulative, not
Could be.
consecutive.
Yeah, could be. That's why we're gonna go through the whole thing to make sure that we're clear on that. So we didn't put it on a day on this. And again, I'm putting little lines connecting all these days together so we can really kind of discuss the days. Siting requirements. The use is permitted in underlying zones and does not violate any conditions of approval for the property, i.e. prior development permits. Strict reading of the current zoning code would result in finding that special events are allowed only in the facilities zone, in other words, the public facility zones.
I think that was supposed to say city requirements, not citing, you said,
No, it's
City.
where it's located, citing requirements.
city requirements, right under special events.
Right,
Okay.
citing requirements. Yeah. Commission may wish to consider either specifying which zones can have special events in this code section, or adding to those zones as permitted use subject in the section. So I remember we did discuss it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't we have a more updated version of this?
I have maybe, but I don't even know where it is. Probably good to go back one version anyways.
Well, this looks like the original unmodified whatsoever draft.
Yeah,
I mean, and we went through a lot of this and made notes and made some changes.
so maybe there is another.
So there should be another updated draft someplace.
Yeah.
I'll go back through my note, not
Yeah,
go back
see
to my
where it is.
computer and see if I can find it.
Do we want to find that draft? And go off of that, or,
Yeah, especially if it's been.
okay,
Well,
And
I have questions on the draft as it is, and since this is a work session, let's knock out a few of these then. Generators.
well, I want to go in sequence. I'm thinking it's 7:30 now, that maybe we should stop the process at this point and continue next week. Spend some time to find that other draft where we've already done a lot of these changes. That's my opinion. What do you guys think?
And if we can't find it, then move on, right? I would think.
Yeah, yeah.
So next
But-
week for a work session would be great.
Not next week.
You said next week.
I meant next meeting.
Oh, well, I would do a work session. I would want to get this knocked out, so we have
Okay.
something by council. So when council comes,
It's not gonna happen. It's
a
gonna
work
take-
session, we could get, if we did a work session,
It'll take 4 to 6 months.
and then we did a next April meeting, or, our March meeting, we could have something to council. With it.
No, I'm not in favor of doing that all. You know, public notice, you have to call a special meeting. We want the public to be here to have the meeting, so let's schedule it a month out. This is a good opportunity now that everybody's caught up on what we did before to, think about it. You know, about what we're doing and why we're doing it. My personal opinion is not to hold a special meeting and to have it on the next scheduled planning commission. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would say that,
Cause I don't wanna keep
Go through
going
this.
and then I realize all this work went and you said, oh, here's the one that we've been working on
Yeah.
all this time again.
And it actually might be in here somewhere, but, you know, we've been at this for an hour and a half now. And I don't want to be going in circles.
and to go through this and do it right, it's maybe 6 months.
I'm
Before it gets to the
a little bit more optimistic. But we need to do it right. I don't want to
Work session,
rush in.
public hearing, and we would, so you have to have a public hearing, work session, public hearing, and a notice, correct?
Mhm.
3. So we could have a work session. I'm just trying to get stuff done for our council, so they'll have it,
Well,
whether
the council won't.
April,
They'll have a full agenda in April.
so.
So I
Hit the
think,
ground running.
I think we've already decided. Randy, Carl, and me have already decided that we aren't gonna do it until next month's meeting. So Dave, we're gonna have to stay with that. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm a very methodical type of person. And things you guys do. So you have to. All right, so, do we have anything for, Rick to research for us for next meeting?
The draft, you just said
Provide.
that we're missing.
Right, we'll find the draft. I think we'll find it somewhere. I know it's on, so we'll get that. Well, and we'll get that out as quickly as possible, so everybody can do it. Sorry, I apologize about going a draft earlier. Okay, so let's go on to our next topic, which is setting the agenda for the March Planning Commission. I can tell you right now, it's gonna be food trucks, part of it.
Food trucks.
Rick, are there any hearings coming up or anything like that? No, good. All right. And then we have to start thinking about replacing the missing planning commissioner. And I think we might wait and because
I intend,
alternate,
oh, I'm sorry.
no, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
My intention is to advertise after the election, last half of March, and have it on your April agenda, which would still make the city council's first agenda later in April.
Perfect. I think that's a really good plan. Yeah, because that way we literally, since we are always before the city council, we can get those people in like a week or so, right over there. Yeah, I like that. All right, so,
Our March agenda is for food trucks then?
right. So does anybody have any comments? Just in general. I'm all commented out for tonight. I talked to them, so.
Once you guys find the latest draft that you had, when will that be available to us? To kind of-
What I'll do is we'll put it up on the website.
Well, at least put a
How often
notice.
do you guys look at the website and how can we get in touch with you to let you know?
Yeah, exactly. So if you put it onto the website, we can. Post from there.
And, okay, that's good, yeah. Yeah, that's the problem, so, and as soon as, and we'll just literally have just that code. I think it's buried in one of the packets somewhere, and I just couldn't find it, so. Okay, yeah. Good, I appreciate the interest in it. So you guys don't have any comments? And the next meeting will be
March 7th.
7th. And at this point in time, it is now 7:34. I am closing the planning commission meeting.
Don't we have
Thank you.
staff and commission comment?
We just did that. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to thank everyone for coming out and everyone on Zoom. Hopefully we can get this food truck ordinance done for you ASAP. It doesn't look that difficult from what I've seen, so stay tuned and thank you for coming.
Okay. Now I'll close the meeting at 7:34. Thank you.